So Black Panther will be a cinematic reality in just about 2 weeks. There's a lot I'd like to say both about what it means and can potentially mean, but most of them are things I suspect will be covered better and more meaningfully by people who have perspectives to offer beyond mine. To the debatable extent that the world needs another 36-year-old white nerd's opinion on anything in popular culture, it feels especially unnecessary in this case. What I can speak with some authority on is that this thing is going to be freaking huge, and it looks like the reviews are going to be pretty good as well. Full disclosure, I haven't seen it yet. I know a few people who have. They say it's really good, which is not a surprise because that's pretty much been the case for all of the Marvel Cinematic Universe movies. That's kind of what made them the definitive big-scale cinematic thing of this decade. Hugely popular blockbuster movies that do really well across all demographics all over the world and get consistently good to great reviews as well. Sure, there are outliers, with Iron Man 2 and Thor: The Dark World generally thought of as being disappointments.
Okay, if you're gonna try and refute any part of that, please be my guest, but don't get down in the comments and use Rotten Tomatoes statistics to try and numerically prove it, please. The tomato meter is cancer. Review aggregates are a blight on the fucking medium, my fucking industry. Please do better.
But generally, these are extremely well-reviewed movies, especially considering that big Hollywood action films are historically not expected to be well-reviewed. And that's something that can seem a little bit off because of that very history. A history where the cultural paradigm for decades on end was that big, silly action movies were loved by audiences and either disliked or dismissed by serious academic film critics, whereas smaller, quote-unquote, serious art house films were critical darlings, but mainstream audiences were expected to be disinterested. Now, I think a lot of that is part of a bigger cultural shift in that paradigm, largely brought on by the democratization of information via the internet, wherein critical academia was more readily embracing the idea of what culture at large actually consumes in the popular sense is worthy of serious consideration in the moment rather than only in retrospect, i.e. music critics being more willing to engage seriously with the idea of, say, Beyoncé as a legitimately influential cultural force, whereas it was more typical to dismiss big, broadly popular pop music acts as mass-market trivium in decades prior, only to circle back around later and declare, oh hey yeah, that was onto something. But, because this is the age we live in, some see the relatively recent tendency of Disney, a company that outside of semi-annual animated classics was once best known for making the kind of general audience popcorn sellers that turned big box office but got middling to terrible reviews, to now get better than average reviews compared to other big studios in more suspicious terms, with some electing to see this as evidence of a sinister conspiracy at play. Namely, that the all-powerful Walt Disney Corporation is engaged in a broad and far-reaching campaign to manipulate review scores and pay off film critics in order to artificially inflate the perceived quality of their films versus others. Critics and film writers seen as giving consistently high marks or positive coverage to Disney productions, especially entries in the so-called Marvel Cinematic Universe, are routinely accused of being on the Disney payroll, receiving bribery checks, and all manner of sinister-sounding asinine conspiratorial nonsense, which the obsessive fan bases of other genre films, seen to be in competition with the ubiquitous Marvel slate, most notably Warner Bros.' widely panned DC Extended Universe features, spin even wilder theories of malevolent campaigns undertaken by the film press itself on behalf of their Disney mastermind to turn audiences against the likes of broadly reviled features like Batman v Superman or Suicide Squad, which apparently, without the help of critics, audiences wouldn't have noticed were bad. Such efforts, as they are wont to do in the realm of online discourse, have dovetailed in recent years in common cause with the digital harassment campaigns of the so-called alt-right, which has rather hilariously come to view the Walt Disney Corporation, a multi-billion-dollar capitalist omnigarch founded by a union-busting Kentuckian technocrat with, let's say, complicated views on the subject of race and gender, as something like the head of the serpent in the international social justice warrior Illuminati conspiracy
to eliminate the meal of dinner. We're through the looking glass here, people.
And has expanded outward from the realm of baseless accusations and coordinated social media takedown campaign into convoluted review bombing schemes aimed at artificially lowering the even more pointless than the rest of the tomato meter Rotten Tomatoes audience score of features like most recently Star Wars: The Last Jedi, both as punishment for the film's alleged propagation of feminist and/or social justice themes, and as a corrective to the great Disney bribery conspiracy they believe is responsible for a film they did not like getting good reviews and earning money back regardless in the first place, with further such operations apparently already being planned against Black Panther for reasons I trust require very little explanation. Because justifying the undertaking of an actual conspiracy has always been one of the best reasons to make up a fake one. Of course, it all but goes without saying that no one at Disney is likely to be bribing movie critics, because by and large that's something that doesn't actually happen in that business, and not just because film criticism is considered superfluous enough to the forming of general audience opinion and box office turnout that more and more of my profession is funding itself via fucking Patreon every week. This is something that people have often assumed to be a much bigger part of the entertainment and criticism business in general, ever since the payola scandals of the 1950s, but has very little modern basis in any kind of fact. Not that there's no such thing as film critic scandals, but that they've typically taken forms more bizarre but also more illogical from a business perspective than of outright studio bribery. Like when the studio behind A Knight's Tale, for example, hey, remember that movie? That wasn't bad, got caught making up a fake film critic out of thin air to give fake positive review quotes, something which I promise you is more cost-effective than bribing actual critics. On the other hand, as much fun as it is to dunk on the paranoid brain scrapings of the hashtag spirit cooking crowd and gently remind them that they're little more than the violently flailing remnants of an obsolete worldview that no one's gonna miss when it recedes into the abyss of civilizational dead ends, would it blow your mind if I told you that Disney getting better reviews than most other studios was evidence, or perhaps in less loaded terms, a symptom of something not good that you actually should be fairly concerned about? Yeah, see, that's the problem with the conspiratorial mindset. Sure, you might have something akin to a sixth sense for something ain't quite right around here. Folks that develop such tend to do so because they're paranoid, uninformed, or, you know, stupid, so they end up focusing on exactly the wrong something.
I'm your worst nightmare. I have a 3-line phone and nothing at all to do with my time.
See, it is absolutely true that Disney's huge 21st century uptick in positive reviews, coverage, and their dramatically increased dominion over the global pop culture, which is really saying something considering that they were already operating what was effectively their own nation-state in Central Florida for almost 50 years prior to this, are in large part the result of the company spreading its money around. But where conspiracy guys, and it is always guys, get it wrong, is that Disney's big scary secret maneuver isn't about buying movie critics, it's about buying movie studios. And it's not a secret because they're doing it right out in the open and it's not really illegal, though it is still scary. See, Disney's whole model used to be about doing everything in-house. As mentioned, Walt Disney was a complicated man, but he was brilliant, and in particular a brilliant futurist. He understood the true value of consolidating intellectual property under a single mutually sustaining umbrella in a way that was decades ahead of his time, not merely unifying his studio's own creations into a stylistic and philosophical singularity, but also shrewdly overriding the public domain fairy tale and classic stories in the cultural consciousness with his own marketable versions thereof, ultimately creating a Disney-branded headspace that generations of fans not only loved but wanted to become immersed in. The real-world theme parks and resorts being the ultimate tangible expression of this, and right up through the 80s and 90s, that was basically enough. But when it wasn't enough, Disney hit kind of a wall. They wanted to expand their reach beyond the genres and products they were always good at, and now pretty much controlled, period, but attempts to do so in-house tended to be non-starters. Experiments in trying to branch out into the blockbuster live-action market were mixed at best until the Pirates movies. Fans have fond memories of their attempt to get in on all the skewing animation scene with gargoyles, but the ratings and toy sales weren't there for it, which is too bad. Basically, Disney couldn't crack the code on what's more than a little regressively thought of often as boy stuff internally, so they decided, hey, wait a minute, we got more money than God, right? Let's just buy stuff that already works. The first experiments with this were buying Power Rangers, which ended up not really working out for them and ultimately got sold back to Hayam Saban, but ever since then, all the pickups have worked out decently to exceptionally. They see a segment of the global entertainment market that they aren't the dominant force in, and they just buy whoever is. Hey, puppets are fun. Who's number one in puppets? Okay, now we run puppets. Sci-fi movies are always big, right? What's the biggest sci-fi movie? Okay, now we run sci-fi movies. Oh, and who's this guy? Yeah, now he's ours too. Hey, that superhero thing doesn't seem to be going away anytime soon, right? Who's kicking the most ass at that right now? Hey, look, now we run superheroes. Hey, wait, did one of them get away? Not anymore, he didn't. You know what else might be nice to own? Whichever of those guys are left, that thing with the blue guys that we already started making a park for, the dominant brands in TV animation, maybe a dozen or more TV channels than we already own, some sci-fi movies that are like darker for people who are into that. Oh, how about majority stakes in a giant streaming platform and maybe a back catalog of classic movies and shows to fill it up with? Can we take care of that right quick? Apparently, yes, we can. In other words, Disney didn't need to buy good reviews. Why would they when they can just buy the things that are already getting good reviews, and making money, and generating sequels, and moving merchandise?
I'm not greedy. As long as I've got my health and my millions of dollars and my gold house and my rocket car, I don't need anything else.
Now, think about this. The biggest, most reliable movie genres right now are superhero movies and 3D animated family films, usually in that order. Now, there's lots of reasons for that, most of them pretty obviously, but that's what's up. And now you've got a situation where the top superhero studio, by like a lot, and the two top 3D kids animation studios are all actually the same company. And so is Star Wars, those next two Avatar movies, the next Alien, the next Predator, the next Indiana Jones, those are all going to be Disney movies. If they do another Simpsons movie, Disney. Bob's Burgers movie, Disney. The Family Guy movie they've been talking up forever, Disney. Disney all the way down. Now, technically, that's not a monopoly, but it's about as close as you can get to one, and though it's not like we break those things up anymore unless you're trying to score political points. And while it's easy to get caught up in the prospective short-term benefits like the X-Men and Fantastic Four coming back into the Marvel Cinematic Universe, or I don't know, Avatar versus Predator. Just the idea of only one corporation, even one that's been mostly on the right side of things or over the last generation or so, getting to hold final sway over such a vast amount of what constitutes an increasingly global shared culture has to make you just a little bit uneasy, right? And that's to say nothing of the fact that you can only release so many films in a year, and so many projects being grouped under one banner instead of competing with each other for space generally means we're going to get fewer in the long run. Oh, and there's also kind of a lot of precedent for letting companies that make the fun stuff we like become massively powerful global entities, leading to some ugly happenings, which we're then more likely to excuse because, you know, fun stuff we like. Do you even want to know what they do to the people who make your phones and your video games? Of course you don't.
I don't like the spunk in this one. Seems like she still has some will to live.
And that's the key, folks. The Walt Disney Corporation is well on its way to being more powerful than many small countries, and perhaps more globally influential than many large ones currently under poor management, which I have to assume is something that most people don't want to have happen, but that there really isn't any law, international or otherwise, to stop. The only way to stop it would be for consumer audiences to decide they aren't having it, and we all know that's not going to happen because, again, fun stuff we like that we don't want to go away, which means all of this is pretty much proceeding on exactly the schedule Disney wants it to. Sure, maybe Comcast swoops in and takes the Fox stuff instead, or they absorb Sony Pictures, and Sony Electronics in Japan has been trying to unload that for years now. But either way, that still means you've got two unfathomably powerful corporate media empires instead of just the one, which is not necessarily the kind of competition the anti-monopoly outlook is talking about. And somebody's gonna try to buy Nintendo at some point, right? Probably NBC Universal, since they're building that theme park. And letting the Minions people make the Mario movie. See, also, if Apple was to say buy Netflix, or hell, if Amazon was to buy any of the stuff we're talking about, they could. Amazon is fucking massive now. We'd instantly be talking about another giant player rolling in all at once, and that's not even touching on Dylan Wanda, Tencent, and Alibaba, three absolutely massive Chinese firms also making big maneuvers into the entertainment IP scene over the last 5 years. Well, many of you were not looking. Basically, the corporate dystopia you were warned about in the 80s showed up sometime in the 90s, gradually enough that you almost didn't notice. And the fight kinda happened without a fight. I mean, just look at the big net neutrality fight currently raging. Now, yes, don't misunderstand me, I am for net neutrality, we need net neutrality, throttling is bullshit, but if you really think that that's about the little guy versus the corporations, that's not what's happening. That fight already happened, and sorry to break it to you, we lost. This fight is basically between Alphabet and Comcast over who gets to run what they already won. And in case you thought that was getting a little bit off point, all of this should be much, much more frightening to you than some stupid conspiracy about Disney paying for good reviews of movies that pretty much everyone likes already anyway.
Hey, me again. Hi. So I'm putting this episode together, and it occurs to me that dropping this sort of like semi-pessimistic, cynical, I mean, you can't help but be cynical about this stuff, but I assume you know what I mean, like more cynical than I normally am, kind of video about Disney and Marvel and all of this stuff right in the middle of the Black Panther hype might be kind of sort of like a bad look. Like, because this movie is becoming such a big deal and is getting so much attention for, you know, representation. There's also this whole kind of smug, snarky backlash to all the good vibes happening, where people want to trash the movie and trash the fact, more so trash the fact that people are excited about the movie, with people like buying out theaters to take inner city youth on a field trip to see the movie and such. And you know the attitude, the whole, oh, this isn't really helpful, this isn't real representation because it's corporate and it's capitalist and it's fake and this is just Disney buying you off and it's AstroTurf activism and all of this bullshit. You know, stuff that like conceptually may have like a point in the undercurrent, but seems like it only ever comes up when it's time for super smug, white, more left than thou dudes, and it is always dudes, want to shit all over something that it looks like a lot of people are finding something positive in. And it occurs to me that, you know, dropping this video, you know, now might be seen as feeding into that kind of a mindset, which is, you know, something I would not want to do because I am the furthest guy removed from that whole, like, you know, we need to abandon identity politics, white smug dude, progressive trip. That's not my scene. Because I think, you know, regardless of how the movie turns out, I haven't seen it yet, but if people can find something positive in it, then, you know, the fact that it's like a Marvel thing or a Disney thing or, you know, it's corporate or whatever, shouldn't fucking matter, you know, so long as you keep your head straight about it. That having been said, the question, the actual underlying, not just dunking on something to be an asshole idea at the center of that is an interesting thing to explore. You know, the question of when something with positive message or meaning or whatnot is also part of, you know, like a money-making merchandising venture, and where you draw the line on that sort of thing, that's interesting to me. And I would do some of it in this video, but this one's already long enough as it is. It's like 2 days late. So I'm thinking that'll be next week's show to do something on those lines. I think that'll be interesting. So there's a tease of that. Still, until then, I did just want to kind of pop back in the, you know, the live action bit so you know I'm serious, and just make it totally clear that, you know, as cynical and, you know, and I do generally think that this is scary stuff, the monopoly of media business, as cynical and serious as I take that, I'm not trying to harsh your buzz or shit all over either you or the Black Panther movie or what seems to be the enormously positive reaction and experience that a lot of people are getting out of it, regardless of where it comes from. So yeah, that's what's up with that. See you next week, to be continued.
Hey gang, here's a question that keeps coming up. If your handle is MovieBob, where are your movie reviews? Well, my old reviews are in a lot of places. You'll find many of them on my YouTube channel, but you'll find the brand new ones on Geek.com, an awesome site that's also your one-stop news source for science, TV, gaming, technology, nerd culture, the works. You can find all my reviews directly by going to geek.com/author/bchipman, because that's my real name, and you can get regular updates on all my reviews and all of Geek.com's other great content by signing up for their kick-ass newsletter at subscribe.geek.com. And don't forget to also subscribe to the Geek.com YouTube channel, where you'll find the videos that accompany my reviews and tons of other great content too. Remember, that's Geek.com, the Geek.com newsletter, and Geek.com on YouTube. Make sure you don't miss out on all the latest MovieBob reviews. You can also check out my own new website, MovieBob Central, where you'll find my blog, links to all my work, and shop for my books, ebooks, and future MovieBob products. And please remember to like these videos, share them with all of your friends, and subscribe to this channel. Thank you for watching another MovieBob production.